Welcome, one, and welcome all to the first ever episode of the Toku and Anime Night Podcast, a podcast where we talk about anything tokusatsu related or anime related, be it an episode of a show that we watched or an event that we've gone that celebrates toku or anime, or just some things that we like to talk about in regards to tokusatsu and anime. I am your humble host, AstroTide94, and welcome one and welcome all to this very first episode. Like I said, today we're going to have plenty to talk about today. So sit back and relax as I am going to discuss certain things today. Okay, so today on our very first episode of the Toku and Anime Night Podcast, we're going to be discussing basically something that we as fans of toku anime or any other content might often deal with at times, one that's not exactly favorable by anyone. So what am I talking about today? I'm of course talking about controversies. Yeah, controversies. Now, I know a lot of people are not exactly going to be proud or like that word, but when it comes down to controversies, of course, the idea of a controversy is of course according to my Google search, or better yet, as we go to Merriam-Webster, a controversy is a discussion marked especially by the expression of opposing views, such as disputes, as well as quarrels, strifes. Yeah, um, controversies have had their thing around tokusatsu, anime, and well, it's been very well known in pop culture and other content, such as Transformers, Marvel, DC, Star Wars. There's always there's always something that people might not like, might like, and there's always like this like huge argument between that side that's like about like, oh hey, I like this. Why are you bad mouthing it? While others say, I really do not like this. They could have done better. They could have done far better than that. But that's what controversies are known for. There are usually arguments. There's often arguments that we often talk about. There are certain topics involving these ideas, and and today, and of course, when it comes down to the world of anime, there are a lot of them, and the ones that are noticeable, excuse me, the ones that are noticeable right now in the world of anime, or at least in Japanese pop culture, is none other than Pokemon. Now, you guys know what Pokemon is, right? Pokemon basically a series of it's basically a pop culture series about fictitious creatures that of course that you could train, and of course that you could always train or often or often be friend or be like personal friends or allies of theirs. They'll help you out, you will help them out, sort of like sort of like bond, sort of like you have like a bond between those two, like between one or various. And of course, Pokemon started its life as a video game on the Game Boy series in Japan, back when it was just called Pocket Monster. And of course, in the United, and of course, we had the anime coming out later on, a year after the premiere of the games, as well as the trading cards, which recently the Pokemon card game right now. There's like if you go to like a Walmart or a Costco or a Target, you're bound to see a lot of people buying Pokemon sealed products, not just like one pack or one box or like one special like package of sorts. I'm talking about like literally the quite frankly the entire stores, like quite frankly the entire shelf itself. I'm like, wow, there is something happening right now in the Pokemon card game that's really causing all of this. Which makes me want to now, which I thought today's topic, we look back at some of the well-known controversies Pokemon had. Now, I'm only going to be looking at four specific ones. One of them is the banned Porygon episode that never came out in the United States, but only aired once in Japan, and for a good reason that we will explain in a bit. Another being another controversy involving Pokemon versus religious institutions or individuals who happen to be a part of some who happen to be a part of those religious institutions who view Pokemon as evil or unpure or satanic, as it were, as well as the controversy involving a uh, a Burger King toy that had the Pokemon branding on it that ended up, of course, costing the life of several younger children, and finally the Pokemon Go controversy. Um, those are the big four controversies we'll talk about. But I'm going to talk them in brief. I won't go full explanation on each topic, but I'm only going to explain things a little briefly about them. So, and as well as this, we're also going to talk about, and afterwards, I do intend to talk about anniversaries of certain tokusatsu or anime content, and as well as a, and as well as of course, of course, give you my final comments on today's episode or anything I want to give out in my or anything I just want to say from the bottom of my underneath my chest. So let us begin with some of these controversies. So stay tuned. Okay, so one of the many first of many Pokemon controversies, and this is one that's always been obvious to many, though not as obvious to everyone, but to a majority that knows about this controversy. I'm of course going to be talking about the banned episode of Pokemon that only came out once upon a time in Japan, and why it never came out outside of the country since then. Okay, so the episode I'm going to talk to you guys about today is an episode of Pokemon called Deno Senshi Porygon. Um, I know I didn't pronounce that name right, but just understand, I'm not always good with every name in the world. Let's try to be all right. I'm not fluent in any. I'm only fluent in two languages, and it's only English and Spanish. So keep that in mind. And even though I don't mind learning another language, still, it doesn't mean I can learn it easily. But anyways, but the epi- but Deno Senshi Porygon, often translated as Electric Soldier Porygon, which sounds like a kick-ass title if you think about it, or Computer Warrior Porygon, or in some, yeah, I don't know. they give you different translations, but it is one of the later episodes of the first season, specifically the 38th episode. Of course, and when it came down to this episode, it aired on December 16th of 1997. So only a few days away from Christmas of 97. Um, and yeah, this was around the time before the United States ever got a hold of the Pokemon property in terms of, okay, how we're going to do this series. So, a thing about Deno Senshi Porygon, in fact, I'll explain it briefly what the episode is about. Um, Ash and friends, Ash, Misty, and Brock at the time, make their way to the nearest Pokemon Center to heal their Pokemon, specifically to heal Pikachu following a battle. And of course, they discover that the transmitting device to use for the Pokeballs has is dealing with technical problems. So Nurse Joy, who's always in charge of the Pokemon centers, request a professor known as Akihabara. Again, I apologize if I don't pronounce any of those names right. Bear in mind, I'm only good with just two languages, and neither of them are Japanese, mind you. But anyways, though, so yeah, in fact, he was the one that, in fact, the Akihabara, of course, was the one that created the transfer system. And of course, what happened was that the Team Rocket, aka Jesse, James, and Meowth, which this was before Johto, by the way. When we just had three members of Team Rocket. This was before Wobbuffet was ever even a thing. They steal a Porygon, his prototype Porygon, a digital Pokemon that only exists in the realms of cyberspace, and of course, Akihabara sends, of course, Ash and his friends to cyberspace, obviously. Um, which, don't worry though, they won't encounter a big blue bird voiced by Gilbert Gottfried, or ever have to deal with a big chinned green skinned dude voiced by Christopher Lloyd. If you know what I'm talking about in terms of those characters, then you get a gold star for me. Otherwise, um, yeah, Ash and friends alongside with Pikachu, alongside with another Porygon that the professor had, go into cyberspace, try to retrieve they try to retrieve the first one. So yeah, of course, as always, they had their battle. Ash and his friends, his Pokemons, Team Rocket's Pokemon on the other side, duking it out, as it were. But and but there would be one way that they ended that episode. But the episode had basically this episode was well remembered for something bad that happened. In fact, as soon as the episode was about to conclude, or better yet, or the final battle between the Team Rocket, or better yet, the final moments of that battle between Ash and friends and Team Rocket, Pikachu would stop a group of missiles with his Thunderbolt attack, which would result in an explosion. And the explosion was actually, and the explosion effect would be caused by using a bright red and bright blue flashings, and flashings very quick. That's like, yeah, it triggered some people. Yeah, it triggered some people's seizures. In fact, at the time of the new episode of Pokemon would be airing late. around in the evening, say like at 6:30 p.m. in Japan Standard Time. Um, of course, the episode would be broadcasted over several stations on of course on that Tuesday night, which which December 16th was on a Tuesday, and and in the end of it though, there were a lot of people that got at that at the point of that moment. Yeah, a lot of people got hospitalized. Some people experience blurred vision, headaches, dizziness. Um, Others would suffer seizures, blindness, and probably some of them didn't even. Some of them went. Probably some of them, unfortunately, would end up uh, would end up being even more hospitalized. And yeah, and almost 700 people were affected by this. Um, and uh, and half of, and 60% of that number happened to be female, while the rest happened to be guys, or happened to be men, or males, excuse me. And of course, yeah, and it definitely was really, yeah, and it was a very unfortunate event that later on they had to cancel. Later on, the episode in question had to be following that episode. Pokemon would go under a few months of suspension, specifically throughout the remainder of '97, all the way till early to mid spring of 1998. Would Pokemon return into making new episodes? In fact, the episode that would proceed after that one would be an episode known as Goodbye Pikachu. Yeah, if you know that episode, yeah, yeah, you better have some tissues with you, folks, because that is a tearjerker episode for sure. But when it came down to, but of course, yeah, that episode would be, and yeah, that was really unfortunate that yeah, you had people who sadly died. Yeah, you had well, not died, but you had people who really got they really got messed up by that. It's unfortunate that it happened to these poor people. Yeah, and the Pokemon episode never, and of course, what happened would be this that the episode in question never aired after that. And when it came down to it, there was a lot of like pop culture reference, like a lot of people, and of course, don't think this was like, oh, it never made it to like, oh, news in real life, because BBC, British Broadcasting Company, that's what their initials are. Don't think it's anything like inappropriate now. Seriously, some of you guys really need to get your head out of the gutter for once. Or as Tyler Perry's Mr. Brown will go out of his way and say, "Stop being nasty." Seriously, just what the hell with some of you guys. But staying on topic though, what happened was that the Pokemon show, the poke. What happened was that a lot of yeah, they BBC did had like this explained what happened. As well as this, there was even like, okay, a lot of pop culture references to that episode, such as the Simpsons episode 30 Minutes Over Tokyo, where the Simpsons end up watching a cartoon that of course causes seizures. um yeah mostly titled Battling Seizure Robots. But and of course everybody was going on a seizure and all. And of course they would had yeah, definitely that was a they definitely the Simpsons writers knew what they knew their research. But this particular piece of Pokemon media never made it into it never made it outside of Japan in terms of distribution of the episodes in question. Meaning we never had the episode for starters. And before you, oh yeah, and if anyone has like the yeah, that's my computer. Hopefully I'll upgrade this computer so it can maintain a lot longer than that, and not have to hear those god awful words. But yeah, the episode in question really had its pro. Yeah, the episode in question never made it into outside of outside of Japan, though 4Kids, who at that point had distribution rights for Pokemon here in the West, they wanted to show that episode, but censored, but more neutered version of it, aka what 4Kids would do in terms of trying to water down or dial down certain scenes or localize certain scenes in a way. If you guys know what 4Kids is practices are, then yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But in case you don't know, yeah, 4Kids were very nefarious for even doing for editing out anything that looked Japanese, even though the content that they're showing us are from another country. And yet they decide, well, let's pretend it was not in Japan, right? In terms of editing out anything that looks remotely anything that might not be what people would be familiar with. But even then, even then there were stories that 4Kids wanted to show the episode without that bright red and bright blue flashing scene. But the United States government as a whole said no, you cannot show it. Now of course it's just a story that I've heard, but I don't know if any of that is anywhere remotely true. But when it came down to this episode, the Porygon episode, the episode in question would never be shown. Like, even if there were like an altered version of this episode that went well with the 4Kid censors, the US government themselves did not this to happen. They didn't want to deal with the same consequences that those who viewed it in Japan did. So as such, the Pokemon episode, the Electric Soldier Porygon or Cyber Soldier or whatever you want to call it, never made it to the United States. Though there are internet archives of the episode in question that you can watch in full. But if you guys are gonna, and there's even like, okay, the clip of that moment. So, but I will say this for anybody that wants to view that episode. Uh, Warning that the episode in question will contain seizures. It will blind and of course there was a reason why they had to ban the episode in question. However, however, though, when it came down to the impact of the anime in question or the episode in question on how it impacted viewership later on, uh, here's how it all went down. Apparently, with this one, as I said before, the Porygon episode would after Porygon, Pokemon. There were no new Pokemon episodes premiering at the time. So they had to suspend. So whatever episodes that they had ready to go were suspended until later on things were resolved. And of course, they also had to rewrite episodes as well, or change a few things episode wise due to the suspension. So yeah, reruns were technically a thing in Japan, so they had to fill that time slot for Pokemon for the re- they had to fill the time slot for Pokemon with reruns. However, um, and then by the time they would return, someone from the network would of course inform of course the Japanese government that the inspection that they've done was complete, because yeah, they had to, yeah, the studio were under inspection at the time. They had to be inspected. Actually, no, it was like, no, it was the TV networks that they had to do the inspection all. Um, because TV Tokyo were the ones that were showing the Pokemon episode. As a bonus, and as well as this, there were a lot of children that did not want to see this show going away. They wanted Pokemon to continue, even in spite of what happened. And so and there was even like letters to the networks like, please do not cancel this show. I love this show. Don't, we don't want it gone forever. And those kids, ought to get they ought to get an applause for writing those letters, because, well, had it not been for them, Pokemon would not have been a thing it would not have been a worldwide thing. That's for sure. In fact, in fact, um, in fact, when it came down to it, had it not been for the fan response of it, I don't think the anime boom in the late '90s here in the United States, would have. Okay, while we were getting anime later, while we were getting anime at that time, it wasn't as, yeah, we didn't get as big as much as titles. But when '98 came out, that was when anime was taking its stride. In fact, at 1998, anime was becoming mad popular with around the U.S. worldwide. But but of course the Porygon, but yeah, and had the networks canceled Pokemon, yeah, I don't think the anime boom would have. I don't think the whole anime boom would have been without Pokemon. In fact, yeah, Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z, they were big things, but you needed another one, to at least another anime title that would at least, for the most part, give you like a third alternative. And as well as this, there and as well as this, yeah. And when it came down to later, and then when as time went on in '99 and beyond, we were getting anime mostly for children, mostly aimed for kids, but with a few localization changes here and there, and some that were aimed for teenagers, but had to be dialed down as like, oh, shows for like like for an older child, like a Y7 audience. But other than that, though, the Porygon really, but in reality, it was rather unfortunate that it happened, that these poor kids, that some of these poor children had to deal with that, and probably elderly too, or anyone with photosynthesis issues, or anyone that might be triggered easily by very bright flashing colors, or effects that might be too much. And oh yeah, and also when it came down to that network exec, she would pass on this message for all viewers, that if they were going to watch any further programming of any sorts, be it Pokemon or another show that uses like bright, flashy effects, to always watch the show in a well lit room in well distance. Yeah, something that a lot of children here in America did not pay attention for the most part because some of us like to have the room turned off from its lights, and us having at least 2 feet close to the damn TV screens, which is crazy, but a lot of us kids back then did it. Hell, I'm guilty of that kind of stuff too. And yeah, hence I have to always wear prescription glasses. But other than that though, yeah, the Porygon episode changed everything for anime content in the as years went by, and as well as how many people would view programmings at the time too. In particular, anytime a show in Japan would begin, it would all it would always let you know that hey, it might contain bright, flashy colors, but they leave you with this warning, though it's written in Japanese, but nonetheless, it's a warning to let you guys know that when watching this show, always watch it at a well lit room, distance away from the TV screen. You'll often see that with fan subs of anime programming too. So it was unfortunate that it happened, but in the end of the day, it was just that it happened, and and it did change the world forever in terms of pop culture. Okay, so in 1998, Pokemon would come out in the United States. It was already viewed as, in fact, it would of course provide a change for people out there who are watching shows like Spider-Man, Batman, Power Rangers. Um, technically, and well, and although the likes of, and of course, the likes of Spider-Man were already losing in the ratings against Pokemon, but only because they probably decided to do a new Spider-Man show known as Spider-Man Unlimited, and not finished off that one arc, the the what's it called? It's that arc where all the different Spider-Mans from different universes would come together and stop an ultimate evil. Yeah, they could have done they could have finished off that angle, but no, let's do a new Spider-Man show. One that, well, technically was not as successful as many people would think. And I'm going to have a drink of water, by the way. Oh, and brief public service announcement, always drink water. Okay? I know some of us like our can of Monster Energy or Coke or whatever. By the way, we're not sponsored by any of those companies, but always drink water. Okay? Just a friendly PSA. But anyways, though, but when Pokemon came out in '98, it took the world by storm. People were talking about it. People were talking about how great the show was. In fact, you had people buying Pokemon. In fact, you had those kids buying Pokemon cards, probably earning a few extra dollars to buy them toys of Pokemon. Even the Pokedex itself, made by uh, made by Tiger Electronics, which is probably the best thing Tiger had ever made, because I cannot say their Tiger Electronic video games that they made or even the Gamecom were perfect, especially how they advertised the Gamecom. Like you, this game has more video games than all of you idiots have brain cells. Yeah, remember that ad where the guy called me an idiot and the video games that Gamecom had more than my brain cells. Spoiler, I have more brain cells than Gamecom's video game library. But we're not here to talk about Gamecom or anything like that. We're here to talk about another. We need to keep on topic with the Pokemon one. because this one I'm about to talk to you guys about is something that a lot of people may be familiar with at the time. Now, during the popularity of the show, there were a lot of concerned parents thinking that the series was going to distract their children from doing anything. Like it was going to be too much of a distraction. None in their words. But that did not stop a bunch of religious people, not all religious people, but various religious individuals who went out of their way and said Pokemon is created by the devil. Now, yeah. Okay, so there's a video. So currently there's a YouTube video out there called called the aka aka The Occult in Your Living Room, episode 1, Stephen Dolan's The Prophecy Club, which somebody actually uploaded this video, and it was basically a recording of Stephen Dallas, the of the Prophecy Club. Who is Stephen Dallas, you ask? Well, this guy looks like a cleaner but fatter version of Michael P.S. Hayes. If you know who Michael P.S. Hayes is, then you know who he is, but if not, blonde mullet with facial hair. This guy actually almost looks like he looks like Michael P.S. Hayes or Midian is if he went on to become a Christian and not of course and not worshiping the Undertaker and all that garbage. So yeah, I'm gonna read a little bit of the description of that video, which was uploaded by Roman Gra. Stephen Dollins is an ex-Satanist high priestess, exposes the subtle devices used to infiltrate the homes of Christians and non-Christians alike to lure the young and old into practice of witchcraft and Satanism. So yeah, and yeah, this is just one sentence I'm reading for you guys. But of course, at the time, back then, there were a lot of things that a lot of religious people viewed as satanic, evil, or just plain wrong, or just immorally wrong. There have been some religious preachers that have attacked, of course, Teletubbies for being for promoting homosexuality. And before anyone asks, this came at a time when homosexuality was not viewed in a positive light. In fact, I know today's politics may not be as great, but back then, if you were viewed as a gay person, that was bad. That was not a good thing. If you were LGBTQ plus in '98, you were viewed as terrible. You were viewed as worse than you were. You were viewed as worse as any world dictator out there. But but when it comes down to the fact that I watched Teletubbies when I was like a preschool kid, no, it never made me gay or anything like that. Uh, but but at the same time, it didn't stop these people from saying whatever garbage they wanted about certain pop culture stuff. And Pokemon was on their list. In fact, Mr. Dallas, he would talk about how of course, Pokemon was how Pokemon would infiltrate children into devil worship, witchcraft, many of those things. In fact, he even once said that Mewtwo was doing the gesture of the devil, and of course, he was also, and also he had his arm raised up in a way, in a certain way too. Um, he also viewed that Ash was the incarnation of Lucifer, and as well as this, he wasn't the only person that went out of his way and called Pokemon satanic. In fact, there were other religious people that said similar things about it, albeit asinine things. I'll play you one clip from. I'll play you like a small clip. Hopefully, if you can hear it. This one coming from a video called "Pokemon is Satanic," uploaded by Chadtronic, which he too tackles this topic.
Demonic. The answer to that is yes. They are all Oriental demons.
No, okay, no, sorry, I got one bit wrong. But he does talk about the Prophecy Club's video, so yeah, I'll play it for you.
Started out as a cartoon, went to a comic book, they made it into a video game, went to toys, collectible card game. It's not new, but it's new to kids, and they're eating it up.
So yeah, he talks about how Pokemon became like this big thing in terms of, okay, toys, cards, video games, everything. And
Guy's hair.
yeah, and of course he even also talks about this guy's mullet.
This thing is actually called Polyworld, but they actually had another name for it before they renamed it. When this creature first came out, it was called Hypno. And they changed it to Polyworld to make it a little more innocent.
Yeah, he's talking about the whole localization ordeal, which yeah, some Pokemon's names were changed into a different name. Poliwhirl in particular, his name was Hypno. In fact, he technically was called Hypno. In fact, let me see. In fact, Japanese name. In fact, actually, no, he wasn't called Hypno. He was called Nyorozo. But I think he was But I think he was also talking about like a prototypical name that they had in mind. But but of course, he was given a international name of Polyworld. So yeah, yeah, he was talking about like the whole localization ordeal. He was also the this also Mr. Stephen Dollins also was talking about how, yeah, he would also affiliate Magic the Gathering within it, because at the time too, Magic the Gathering and Pokemon were both viewed as devil worship, especially that Magic was, there was actual practice of magic, but through sorcery, you had sorcerers and magical beings, but, but okay, and this is someone who's never played Magic the Gathering in his life before, nor am I interested in getting into Magic, which I'm sorry to anybody that wanted me to go into the MTG, but I'm not interested, sadly, in it. But and this is coming from somebody who's into like card games like the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, Digimon TCG, Pokemon TCG, Cardfight Vanguard, and let me just say that as somebody who's never been a Magic the Gathering player, Magic the Gathering, from when I from from what I see in terms of when people are playing it, like at a local card shop or talking about it feels more fantasy like. Yeah, it's more fantasy like. like these people don't really, and yeah, and of course a lot of these people, and of course I think these people forget that that yeah, they're more they're more like, okay, ancient fantasy creatures, like mythological kinds, like, okay, like the centaur, the minotaur, elves, pixies, but oh yeah, and at times dragons. But but the guy goes out, but of course the only reason he's affiliating Magic the Gathering and Pokemon is because both brands at the time were handled by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards actually handled distribution rights for Pokemon until Pokemon themselves would handle it all for themselves, and did probably a far better job. But Wizards had always been known for Magic, MTG, and yet he goes out of his way and says that Pokemon is yeah, and he goes out of his way and say that, oh, they practice witchcraft the same as Magic, but that's a that's a lie. That's a lie. That is a big, big, fat lie. Much so that this so-called ex-Satanist who wanted to expose Pokemon, the guy that wanted to expose Pokemon out there, for being something that's a devil worship or anything like that. Yeah. Unfortunately, no. There was nothing satanic about Pokemon. Oh, and you may also end up watching this video, which is a which of course is Pokemon Power by by Shimoyoho, which they songify YouTube videos.
Pokemon, plural. I said, son, what is that one morning? He said, that's Pokemon. Son, I found out that Pokemon means pocket monster. But why shouldn't they carry these monsters in their pocket? Pokemon world is a world of the demonic.
Now, if you ever find the original video of that one religious pastor, he goes and does tackle. Yeah, he goes out of his way in thinking that, yeah, Pokemon is Satanistic as well, which again, both, which again, neither, neither of, which again, both of these guys have they have no clue on what they were even trying to say. In fact, many of them trying to make Pokemon look like, like evil and just plain wrong. Like, oh, the devil created Pokemon. And it got so bad that, yeah, and this kind of false accusation got so bad that that of course the Vatican had to step in, and they had to talk about oh yeah, and they wanted to make oh yeah, and they wanted to at least see what they thought of the Pokemon series as a whole, be it the anime or card game or whatever. In fact, when it comes down to the Pokemon and the Vatican, well, definitely the Vatican didn't exactly found any issue with Pokemon. If anything, the Vatican themselves went out of their way and said that there was nothing evil about Pokemon. And of course, yeah, and it was just more like nothing. And of course, it was just nothing more than just okay, that, and if anything, it's just more like, okay, they're just that, yeah, Pokemon was seen more as like a how do I say it? Well, definitely it was not viewed as devil worshipping for sure, because there was no elements of devil worship whatsoever. Especially that these exaggerated claims had, of course, been lies created by these people just to try to give Pokemon a bad image. But unfortunate, and of course, the Vatican, of course, would tell these people to shut up. There was nothing evil about it. If anything, you guys are promoting evil yourselves through your line of ignorance. And in response to the Pokemon cards, the Vatican would create their own trading cards based on religious saints like Jesus, Moses, the Virgin Mary, them sorts. So yeah, definitely what these people are saying, definitely those religious people, those nut jobs, definitely these were people that were taught. Yeah, definitely these were the most stupidest. These were people that knew nothing about what Pokemon was about. There was never any idea of Pokemon being devil worship or anything evil. And the guy, oh yeah, and there was even a oh and there's even oh yeah, and speaking of Dollins, he actually had a Twitter. Someone actually there happens to be a video. Yeah, there happens to be like this guy. Like he also had like a full like he also went like the guy's active like on Twitter or X. I call it Twitter because I'm not calling that shit X. And no, I don't. And no, I will not open an X for you guys for this series. But yeah, he goes out of his way and acts like, yeah, like if you thought his comments about Pokemon was bad, oh boy, his Twitter comments and attitude. Oh god, fucking oh my god, this guy. Oh my god. And you wonder why people think Twitter is a toxic hellhole. Well, probably guys like him make it toxic as hell. Hell, I'd rather be in Chernobyl than to be with this guy. But and yeah, and I know I shouldn't say stuff like that, but honestly, he might as well has done such a thing. So yeah. Next time, if somebody tells you that a particular anime title is promoting Satanism or devil worship, ignore that. Ignore those people. In fact, don't even listen to a single word they say, because what these people are saying is completely ludicrous. It's total caca if we're thinking of it's literal shit they're talking. They're just shit spewing. It's just shit spewing that they're saying. Okay, definitely not worth listening to. These people, ignore them. They're on drugs. They probably have no clue what they're talking about. And of course, and they have no understanding on what life is all about.
Burger King and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission want you to know about the voluntary recall of this Pokemon Pokeball. The ball may pose a suffocation hazard to children under 3. Throw the ball away or return it to Burger King. The safety of your child is of the utmost importance to us.
Okay, if you heard what was said, okay, so to anybody that heard that, yeah, to anybody that did hear that, let's get that out of the way. Okay, so during the hype of Pokemon in the early years, 99, 2000 ish, Pokemon toys were a lot of the Pokemon toys at the time were being released by not just by Hasbro and other companies, but for kids meal toys, Burger King would be kids meal toy provider for Pokemon, or fast food toy provider for Pokemon. And of course, the thing about that is when it comes down to this, when it comes down to Burger King, yeah, they've had their issues before. There were controversies that these guys had before and since. Hell, in particular, yeah, hell, if you guys have heard of them once upon a time serving horse meat, then you know what I'm talking about. Uh, but yeah, we've heard that news before. That one was obviously rather the most infamous thing that was ever told by that was ever it was it was rather infamous when it came down to Burger King and its controversies. But when it came down to like Pokemon toys that they released at the time in 1999 and 2000, they would release like Pokemon plushie doll, like they would release like Pokemon like Pokemon like stuffed toys. Of course I'm gonna play this one commercial. It would contain like Pokemon plushie dolls. In fact, I'm gonna play this ad for you guys briefly.
The Burger King Big Kids meal. It has more of the great tasting food your kids love. Not to mention a little something else your kids may enjoy.
Pokemon.
Now inside every Burger King Big Kids meal you buy, your kids not only get more of the great tasting food they love, they get Pokemon toys and limited edition trading cards from Pokemon the first movie. Pokemon in the Burger King Big Kids meal. Come and catch them all.
So yeah, that was an advert from that was a commercial from Burger King back in 1999 promoting the first film. And when it came down to it, they promoted the idea of the new Pokemon toys that were coming out alongside with an exclusive trading card that. And no, this was not the actual Pokemon. And no, these were not cards that came from the card game. These were like Burger King exclusive like cards. Like, yeah, they were never playable anywhere. They were just your average, like, okay, they were just like your average like trading card that you would get for free. Does nothing. It's more like add tidbits and factoids. But when it came down to the plushies, they were not. They were completely docile. They were harmless. They did nothing to you. When it came down to those trading cards, unless the paper and unless the cardboard used on those cards were had a very thin, like a very small, like thin blade, or like unless they somehow were thin enough to give your kid a paper cut at that time, or you ever got a paper cut at that time, they were they were as well as harmless. When it came down to the Pokeball capsules that came within those toys, just for storage, they were anything but harmless. There was a story that let's see, there was a story that a 2 year old girl suffered a would of course have like this Pokeball toy from her brother, from her older brother, and of course what would happen would be that the course that these capsule balls that this like capsule ball would be the well they would be the yeah, there would be a story that one of the children, like one child, like a child would put practically a Pokeball, like a half of the Pokeball capsule on her, like on like a part of like around her nose and mouth area, and she was like 2 or 3 years old at the time. So meaning that meaning like like a very young child having that put on, like them in their own choosing, like not their own choosing, them and their like them, and at the time they didn't even knew what the hell was it going to do. Um, them putting the that half of the Pokeball on their face like that will result in suffocation. Um, I I mentioned that this child was 2 or 3 years old in fact, this happened in 1999. So she could have been like at this time around this recording. Here we're in 2025, by the way. So let's see. Well, we'll say she's 3. She was 3 at the time, but but of course, but years later, and of course, what would happen was that given that this was like 20 plus years ago, she could have been like in her late 20s at the time. Well, at the time of this recording. So yeah, definitely. And of course, this was not this was not one child that also suffered from this. There were various reports of it too. That that of course, when it came down to a lot of like, when it came down to a lot of like, yeah, it became to the point where where the Pokeball, that the Pokeball all toys, of course, that these Pokeball recalls had to happen. And the reason behind, and the only, and of course, they wanted to make sure that, yeah, the well-being of those kids. They wanted to prevent like another death that happened, similar to those that were lost already. Like they wanted to prevent those deaths from happening. And the next time Burger King would ever do Pokeball toys, or at least like a Pokeball prop toy. In fact, I think there is a Pokeball. In fact, I think they would, of course, either they would do like drill holes for it, or or they would do like an exclusive, like, okay, like one of those like Pokeball. In fact, I'm gonna play another ad from Burger
Kids
King.
love the Burger King Big Kids meal because it's got more food. And now when you buy one, you can get them something else they'll love. Limited edition 23-karat gold-plated Pokemon trading cards from Pokemon the first movie. Just $1.99. Pokemon and the Burger King Big Kids meal. Come and get your mom.
So yeah, they would release another set of Pokeball toys. But these were practically non-lethal ones. And even then they were kind of meant to store the cards inside, like these like gold-plated cards. Um so yeah, but yeah, and of course these would and of course when it came down to these like Pokeballs, they didn't separate into two halves. They could still open, but these would not kill your child or anything like that. But of course, nonetheless, Burger King were responsible for making those toys, and yeah, they definitely had, yeah, definitely there was a lot of backlash behind it. Um, Definitely was not the Pokemon branding as a whole. It was definitely not Pokemon themselves who were to blame. No, they. If anything, the Pokeballs were not that. They were not like, okay, lethal products. At least in later, in terms of various releases, but Burger King would do Pokemon. But yeah, Burger King were definitely at fault for this one. Even to the point where there were stories that one of the Burger King CEOs decided, no, we're gonna still do the Pokemon toys even in spite of what happened. In fact, we're not gonna do a recall of them, but of the Pokeballs, but because various passings happen, and also the FDA and of course the government, and of course the Uncle Sam, the U.S. government had to step in and told Burger King, "Hey, we need you to recall those Pokeball toys now, or if not, then we will. If not, then we will find a way. If not, we will find ways to punish you financially." So Burger King had to. So of course, Burger King were probably told by the government, "Hey, you need to recall them, or if not, you'll be fined various money, and probably very hefty fines too." So yeah, yeah, this one was really unfortunate, and yeah, and of course, Burger King were to blame on this one, not the Pokemon Company themselves. Okay, though it did not stop one of the victims or the parents of the victims creating a website saying Pokemon killed my child. And I think the website does exist or not, but I'm not going to bother looking at it at this time. But yeah, definitely a rather unfortunate circumstance that befell at that time. So years later, Pokemon toy. Okay, so Burger King would still do Pokemon toys even after the controversy, but by then they were not gonna do like okay. But by then they were doing different. They were doing something different at the time. Mostly they were just going. Mostly they were just. Now maybe they did release some Pokemon little minifigures of sorts, but they also would release the special Pokemon card. Well, the Pokemon TCG cards, or at least one individual promo card you could get with every Burger King kids meal. Now, and yeah, like the cards that you could actually use in the card game itself at that time. So yeah, you could get one of those. You could get one of those with your Burger King kids meal. Um, Technically, there was one in 2008 that they released. But by then, McDonald's would later on take over the Pokemon Kids Meal, the Pokemon Kids Meal theme releases, and they still do the same practices that Burger King did with the trading cards. Release them, including with a small little toy, harmless toy, and and. But since then, they kind of just did away with the toys, but would just still release just the packs, but you would still get something from it. Such as like like a small little activity sheet that you get. You know, kind of like okay, like a sticker sheet where you just fill in like okay, where that specific spot of that Pokemon goes to and all that. Um, so yeah, McDonald's actually, and as of right now in 2025. At the time of this recording, February of 2025, Pokemon McDonald's, Pokemon McDonald's stuff is there right now. If you want to have your child, if you plan to get your child something for McDonald's, if you want to, okay, or if you want one of them Happy Meals for yourself. Hey, I'm not gonna judge. We're a judgmental-free zone. We do not judge anybody from doing anything, okay? Everybody's welcome to do whatever the hell they want, so as long as what they're doing is safe, legal, and non-discriminating. That's all I care about. Anyways, so yeah, and since the transfer between Burger King and McDonald's for Pokemon kids meals, we also had a technological advance at times as well. That technology at the time was also evolving, much like with the Pokemon themselves. They were evolving. Technology was evolving. We had laptops that worked better than what we had previously. albeit with further issues, but still efficiency wise they work better. Video game consoles also got new stuff. Done were the days of Sega consoles, Nintendo 64s, and of course PS1s, and came in PlayStation 2s, Nintendo GameCube, Xbox original console. Uh, Same with and same with like other stuff and same with later on when the Nintendo Wii, PS3, Xbox 360, and then after them, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, which currently I own an Xbox One, but I don't really play games. I don't play as much as games on that thing. I mean, hell, I don't really play much as video games as I used to. Oh, and the Nintendo Switch. But anyways, which I also do own, but I do play a little bit more than the Xbox One, though I don't play it as much as I said with Ed. But yeah. But as well as this, our phones got a little bit more advanced. In fact, if anything, we also had done from mobile phones, cell phones, and then smartphones. And and then the rise of various apps and all that stuff. So, in the mid 2010s, specifically 2015, we had the Pokemon company would release a new mobile app game. Perfect for any Pokemon players out there, known as the Pokemon Go app. Yeah, this app actually was a great Pokemon app. You could actually collect Pokemon with this app. You can be just like the Pokemon trainers out there. You could be like Ash Ketchum, Brock, Misty, or if you really like to be them, Team Rocket. Which, hey, can't blame you. Can't blame you. Hey, if you want to dress up like Jesse, go ahead. You got my approval. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I gotta stop. As much as I love the Jesse character, and I do, let's try to be calm about that kind of stuff, folks, and stick to the issue in hand with the Pokemon Go. And yes, Pokemon Go did have its problems, such as, well, one of the biggest issues that Pokemon Go had was, in particular, okay. Here's the thing about technology. Here's the thing about people using their smartphones. Everybody uses them. I use my smartphone, but not. Oh, I use it to watch YouTube videos, play apps like Fate Grand Order, um, or even of course do my online shopping, such as anything I need from Amazon, eBay, or hell, or if I want to order some food, there you go. I got food apps. I got food delivery apps that I can use, of course. And of course I did, and well, I did once upon a time play Pokemon Go, but in 2019, back when the Pokemon Go fad was not as big as it once was. Though still people were using it, but back then 2015, 2016, and 2017 were the crazy years of Pokemon Go. They were the big years of that series or that app. Today, Pokemon Go is still being referenced in other things, but back then, in its earlier years, Pokemon Go would be released. And and of course, as I said, it was one of those apps that would let you go out in the real world and explore places, and of course you could go and collect Pokemon with it, which it did raise its problems. such as, of course, there would be such as there would be people out there who would not pay attention to the world around them, because when it comes down to our smartphones, as great as they are, they can also be addictive as hell. Yeah, my phone is a needed thing, but I'm not always going to be looking at the screen of it forever. But when it came down to Pokemon Go, the app, of course, it would let you go and find Pokemon, but its problems were that there were going to be a lot of people who were going to get distracted in terms of the world around them. Like, maybe you might bump into somebody who's like not being careful at all. And once you tell them, hey, be careful next time, they're gonna be like, dude, can you please leave? I'm trying to capture a shiny Charmander or a shiny Pikachu or a shiny Eevee, which, yeah, and I'm only just naming those as examples of Pokemon because I like to name those. But anyhow, it's kind of unfortunate that, they tell me to stay away from them, and yet they're the ones that end up bumping into me. It's like, dude, you may not want to do that. Hell, you could end up you could end up getting yourself hurt, not from people like me. And no, I don't. And before anyone asks, I do not condone violence towards another person unless it's for self-defense purposes, such as if they attack you physically, then you can fight back, but again, do not throw a punch unless that person throws a punch at you first. All right? And I'm only saying that just for your safety. Okay? If you need to fight, go for self-defense purposes only. And only self-defense. Other than that, though, the Pokemon Go app did provide its issues, as it did, of course, cause a lot of people to be distracted, either around the world around them, through through them as pedestrians, because, well, let's face it, cars can hit you if you're not careful. You need to always be careful now. And 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 as well as this, there are people who often drive on their cars who are always on their phone, which another PSA: please do not be on your phone when you're behind the wheel. Okay? If you need to go somewhere, go somewhere. Do not be distracted by your technology. Just eyes on the road. Be mindful of other vehicles around you. If you end up causing a car crash because you were distracted while driving, then that's your then you're the one to blame on that one. Again, I don't want to be harsh, but that's how it is. If you're not careful on the road. And as well as this, you also had people who would trespass into other properties, like another house, another house nearby, or worse still, there was even reports that someone actually went and used their Pokemon Go app, and they were at a cemetery, like in an actual cemetery. Like, they went to an actual cemetery, and they were using Pokemon Go. They were playing Pokemon Go at the cemetery. In fact, I'm gonna play you one from WKRC Cincinnati, local 12. I'm gonna play their video.
For people and just visiting their loved ones, and it's not a game board.
This huge local cemetery has a problem with Pokemon Go players as they wander through the graves collecting virtual items. Good evening, everybody. Graveside Services.
So yeah, and it became to the point where a lot of these people were a lot of like local grave sites or people who were in charge of these cemeteries were had to, of course, wanted Neon Tech and Game Freak, the creators of Pokemon Go, to do some to actually handle a to actually resolve this issue, because people are mourning the well, there are people out there who are mourning the loss of their loved ones or someone who was close to them in some capacity, and yet you got this one guy, you got this one person on their smartphone trying to of course capture or trying to at least collect a what trying to collect a Squirtle or or Dragonair, and of course that's disrespectful, because that's just plain disrespectful what these people are doing or what these people were doing at that time. And of course that they wanted to enforce these policies. In fact, it wasn't just over there in it wasn't just over there like in Cincinnati. There was also other places out there, or there were other places out there that also had similar stories as well. Um, definitely, yeah, definitely, yeah, definitely, definitely not a good definitely not a good idea to be playing Pokemon Go whilst you're in a cemetery. People are trying to mourn the loss of their loved ones, or are paying a visit to their to their deceased to their deceased to the deceased person that they knew, and what you're doing is just plain disrespectful. I mean, how would you like it if I did the same thing to you, if you're mourning someone's loss and I was the one with the Pokemon Go app doing practically the same thing as you were doing? You would hate that. You would not like that. You would tell me the same thing to you. That, hey, what you're doing is disrespectful. You are just being wrong. And yet these people didn't listen. Like, and yeah, and that's when the Neon Tech and Game Freak had to make the improvements to the apps. So yeah, they tried to enforce policies to make sure no one is on their phone whilst playing Pokemon Go, even as well as making sure that there are areas that are now restricted from access, because let's face it, let's face it, I bet you there were probably someone in area 51 that found a trespasser going into the military base, and suddenly they end up and the reason why they end up trespassing in area 51 is because they wanted that Charizard. Which, no, area 51 would arrest you, or I don't know what could happen, but I'm not going to risk my skin for you guys to find out. But yeah, I will say Pokemon Go, I like the idea of the app, just that they really had to be just that a lot of people had to be very careful now, because that app, as great as it is, as much as it gets you outside and all, the problem with it is simple. You're at times you could be loitering in places that you're not supposed to be in, and sometimes there's bound to be, and sometimes if you end up in and sometimes I'm not sure if the neighborhood in question that you're in is friendly, or you might end up in a place that you're not supposed to be, either in the middle of the road or on some railroads or some railroad tracks. You want to not. All right, this is why, as great as Pokemon Go is, and I do commend it, it had its issues, its controversies involving people trespassing. And it really and really people really need to be very careful out there, because wherever you're going could be your last destination. And I'm only saying this because I care about you guys who listen to this podcast. Because in reality, yeah, where you're going, it may be, where you're going to end up going is going to be a dangerous place, that's for sure. And so I'm done with the Pokemon controversies as a whole. I've mentioned the Porygon. I've mentioned the banned Porygon episode. There's also also why certain religious organizations hated Pokemon, and not to mention the recall that Burger King had to do involving involving one of its involving one of its Pokemon Kids meal products, and finally, and as well as the Pokemon Go. If there are other Pokemon controversies you guys want me to cover, let me know in the comments section, and hopefully I'll do some information on it. Hopefully I'll do like research on it and see what they did, see what's up or what my honest opinions are. But anyways, though, the Porygon episode, completely understandable why they will never show it in the world ever again. But if you are going to look at it through archives, please, I recommend you guys to be very careful when you're watching that episode. As for the televangelists who view Pokemon as satanic, or if anybody tells you that an anime product is the property of the devil, ignore them. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They out there, and even if some anime had demonic themes to them, they're not really meant to be for people. In the end of the day, the demonic stuff isn't exactly the good guy characters, now is it? And even then these people are probably just crazy, as I said. And as for the Pokeball recall, definitely Burger King is responsible for what happened. And if one of those like EVPs said that, and if the story was true about one of the EVPs, of course, saying that no, they wanted to continue to sell the Pokemon products even after the passing of one individual's child, yeah, indeed, Burger King, you're held responsible for it. And as for Pokemon Go's issues, um, look, I like Pokemon Go as much as the next guy, but please be very careful when you're playing that app, okay? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but please be careful. All right? Sounds good? Okay, well, I guess we're going to move on to another topic or so. Okay, so I think I'm going to talk about a few things here. So, recently on Power Rangers' social media sites, they've announced that Playmates. They've of course unveiled a few silhouettes of the new Playmate figures, which and spoilers, it's going to be Mighty Morphin figures. So if you guys are sick and tired of Mighty Morphin Power Ranger toys, like the rest of the other fans, then yeah, you could skip out on this one if you want. But if you feel like you want to collect those figures because, well, maybe you might like their articulation or quality differently, then again, that's your decision, not my choice. I'm just only reporting what I found. So yeah, definitely there is that. And speaking of Tokusatsu shows, or speaking of Power Rangers, some of their respected seasons this year will have anniversaries. SPD will have its 20th anniversary. Lightspeed Rescue, 25th anniversary. SPD came out in 2005. We're in 2025, so 20. 2000, Lightspeed Rescue. We're in 2025, so 25 years ago. 30 years ago, the third season of Power Rangers came out, the Mighty Morphin season 3, that is. And the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, um, would premiere around the summer that of '95. So definitely, definitely we had, definitely some anniversaries. Super Sentai wise, um, Maho Sentai Maji Ranger will be celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Mirai Sentai Time Ranger, um, its 25th. Maho Sentai Maji Ranger is Power Rangers Mystic Force, um, or the basis of Mystic Force. Um, Same with Time Ranger with Time Force. Um, 1995 was the year of Choriki Sentai O Ranger. A very dark Super Sentai, but had to change a few of its elements last moment due to real life issues that happened at the time, such as the Tokyo subway attacks that occurred. Um, and in case you guys don't know what that is, there was a terrorist attack that happened in 1995 in Tokyo, Japan, involving involving members of a dangerous cult that, of course, will unleash like a series of chemicals upon Tokyo subway systems, um, killing or killing people upon what happened, or some that of course, or some hospitalized, but of but and yeah, they did cut the ones responsible for it, and yeah, they were not good people, but due to what happened involving those attacks, uh a lot of shows had to be a lot of the shows, specifically O Ranger, had to change a lot of its content last moment, thanks to the unfortunate issue. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and yeah, rather unfortunate that it happened. But yeah, but yeah, and before anybody asks, yeah, the Tokusatsu shows Tokusatsu shows dealing with real life issues. Indeed there were indeed indeed that indeed what happened in the world of entertainment. They don't know what happens outside of that world, especially when you're doing shows or movies. You don't know what's happening around outside of that world. Um, oh yeah, and also 10-year anniversary or 5-year anniversary of Kira Major, Super Sentai that aired in 2020. Unfortunately, that Sentai season also had to deal with production problems thanks to the worldwide shutdown in 2020. Um, but and of course, as for anime, this year Digimon Adventures, the second adventure, is celebrating its 25 years of the season's existence, featuring as it would be a follow up to the first adventure, but now the original 8 children are a few years older, and the new evil has emerged. And while 2 out of those 8 children returned, 3 new kids would be joining the team, um, to encounter this new evil. Um, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime would also come out in the year 2000 in Japan. Um, of course, we would get the anime around late September of 2001. Of course, the Duel Monsters anime would be about the Yugi and his friends, how they were, in their adventures involving well, involving the Duel Monsters card game, and how its issues would play, and in terms of in terms of worldwide problems. And speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh, 20th anniversary of Yu-Gi-Oh GX's appearance in the United States. following the events of the original Yu-Gi-Oh, Jaden Yuki becomes a part of the Duel Academy to become the next best duelist out there. And and of course also as well as deal with some crazy things that happen at Duel Academy. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX would debut in 2004 in Japan, but we would get GX in around the summer of 2005 through Cartoon Network and their late afternoon block, Meguzi. I don't know if you guys remember that block, but it was sort of to replace Toonami late afternoon. And going back to Digimon, 25 years ago, Digimon the movie would come out, which was just a compilation of 3 Digimon OVA films that would come out, but Saban would make it into a film of its own. But and as well as this, it even featured the Angela Anaconda mini movie, which if you ever tend to watch Digimon the movie, just skip the Angela Anaconda part. It has it doesn't contribute to Digimon, period. And no, I will not tell you what Angela Anaconda is. You have to look that up yourself, and which, by the way, don't. You're gonna hate the abysmal animation of that show. Ugh. Also, 2020, 5-year anniversary of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, 2045, which would take place in the year 2045, and Section 9 would return to deal with another issue that's that's of course dealing with a worldwide terrorist attack, or rather, and that the only and it was a Netflix only anime, so if you want to check that out, it's on Netflix. As well as this, though, folks, we also had Digimon Adventure or Digimon Adventure 2020 would be released around that year. So the anime would have to, though the anime's finale would have had to be delayed further to the fall of 2021. And it was because, again, the worldwide shutdown definitely affected things. And of course, it would just be the original Adventure series, but told on a modern ordeal. Definitely that. Also, this year marks the 25th anniversary of my favorite Transformers anime, Transformers Car Robots, which we would see that anime in 2001 as the Robots in Disguise anime. Car Robots was a continuation of the Japanese Beast Wars series, but in America it was seen as its own universe. Definitely, unfortunately, because um, of course, it could be viewed it could be viewed unofficially on YouTube. The Japanese Car Robots episodes and the Robots in Disguise, the Saban dub of Robots in Disguise as well. And so, I think that's it for anniversaries. So definitely there is that. And of course, and so I will conclude my video off. I hope you guys like this podcast of mine. I will do other podcasts like this later on in the future. In fact, I'm thinking of doing a second episode later on next week. Also, in addition to this, folks, I will also be around the weekend of Valentine's Day. I will actually be going to a convention later on. I'll let you guys know about that in the future. But for now, I am AstroTie94. I hope you guys are having a great day. And as always, please be kind to one another. especially in these times right now of chaos and craziness. Regardless of what you believe in, just be kind to one another, okay? Just be kind to everyone, all right? Please. Don't just try to be kind. Okay? I don't care what you believe in, just be kind, all right? Kindness before personal beliefs. All right? With that, I'll see you guys later.